Rohan had grown up believing in two things: hard work and fate. Not the kind of luck you see in stories, but the quiet notion that if you worked hard enough, something good would eventually happen. In his hometown, where fields met forests and dreams were often measured in seasons, this belief was common. Labor was respected, endurance was admired, and hope was something people carried silently, without complaint. But for Rohan, this belief started to fracture the day his father fell ill, and the family business, a small roadside tea stall they had built with years of painstaking effort, began slipping toward closure. The familiar rhythm of boiling kettles and serving cups felt heavier than ever. Even after years of waking before sunrise and working long into the night, the weight of life's demands seemed to grow faster than his strength. There were days when he felt that no matter how many hours he put into work, his life remained perched on the edge of uncertainty, as though every step forward was matched by something pushing him 2 steps back. One evening, exhausted and disappointed, Rohan walked down the nearly abandoned main road of his town just as the sun was setting. The rosy skies seemed to mock him with their beauty, as if the world carried on without regard for his struggle. He passed the shuttered windows of shops closing for the day and felt a heaviness that had nothing to do with physical tiredness. That night, his father lay in bed coughing, his breath shallow. His mother moved with quiet worry. Rohan felt a fear he didn't know how to name, the fear that all his efforts were not enough. In the silence of his room, he stared at the ceiling and asked himself a question he had been avoiding. Was hard work really the only answer? The thought felt like a seed falling on dry soil, unfamiliar, fragile, but impossible to ignore. The next morning, as a thin line of dawn edged the horizon, Rohan decided to walk to the nearby riverbank, a place he had visited often as a child. The river flowed like an old friend, steady, unhurried, and indifferent to the turmoil of human worries. He sat on a rock and watched the water glint in the rising light. After a long moment, he noticed something he hadn't before. The river didn't struggle against the rocks or the uneven terrain. It simply flowed around them. And in that simplicity was a lesson he couldn't name yet, but felt deep inside. That perhaps struggle wasn't meant to be resisted with force, but understood with patience. For the first time, Rohan felt a shift inside him, not dramatic but subtle, like a door cracking open somewhere deep within. Over the following weeks, Rohan began to change his routine. He still worked at the tea stall, but before sunrise, instead of rushing straight to the stove and kettles, he walked to the riverbank and sat in the quiet. At first, his mind raced with thoughts about bills, responsibilities, and everything that felt out of place in his life. But day by day, the noise inside him softened. He began to ask himself questions he had never truly asked before. What did he want for himself beyond survival? What did he value most deeply? What kind of man did he want to become? These questions didn't have immediate answers, but just asking them made Rohan feel lighter, as if a weight he didn't know he carried was beginning to lift. People in the town began to notice Rohan's change in routine, and some teased him. "You're wasting time," they would say. "There's nothing in sitting by the river." But Rohan didn't mind. Something quiet and powerful was growing inside him, something invisible but undeniably real. He wasn't walking away from his responsibilities. He was walking toward a kind of clarity he had never known. He started writing in a small journal thoughts, reflections, dreams he had once been too afraid to articulate. He wrote about his father's laughter when he was well, his mother's gentle smile, the first time he had ever dreamed of traveling beyond the borders of his town. Writing felt like uncovering parts of himself he had buried under years of routine. Months passed and the tea stall began to stabilize again. Not because the economy suddenly improved, but because Rohan's attitude shifted. He approached customers with genuine warmth instead of fatigue, greeted suppliers with renewed confidence, and managed the accounts with a level of focus he hadn't possessed before. Small things changed, and the cumulative effect was profound. One afternoon, an old friend from a neighboring town walked in, someone who had moved away years ago and built a successful small cafe in the city. They talked for hours about life, work, dreams, and failure. His friend told Rohan about the difficulties of starting something new, the loneliness he had felt, and how he wished sometimes that someone had told him that struggle was part of the process, not a sign of defeat. Rohan shared his riverbank routine and his journal entries. His friend listened, not with skepticism but with deep interest. Before leaving, he said something that stuck with Rohan. "You've found something valuable, not because it's easy, but because you didn't give up on your inner search." Another season passed, and one morning Rohan noticed something remarkable. He woke up before dawn out of excitement, not obligation. The riverbank felt like a sacred place now, not because it was scenic, but because it reminded him of his own resilience. He had learned that clarity did not come all at once, but in whispers, in the steady discipline of showing up every day, even without knowing where it would lead. He saw that the person he was becoming mattered more than the problems he had once considered unbearable. This revelation did not make life effortless, but it made him strong in a way he had never anticipated. But life, as it often does, introduced another test. His father's health took a sudden turn for the worse. The illness that had been manageable became something more threatening. Rohan felt fear rise again, not the quiet worry of everyday life, but a deep, roaring fear that something precious was slipping away. That night, Rohan did not go to the riverbank. Instead, he sat by his father's bedside, holding his hand, feeling the fragility of time itself. He realized that resilience was not just about discipline or routine, it was about love, presence, and the courage to stay close to what truly matters when life feels terrifyingly uncertain. In the days that followed, Rohan balanced the demands of his family with his evolving inner life. He woke early, walked to the river, and then returned to care for his father and manage the tea stall. His heart sometimes trembled with fear, but it also carried a quiet strength born of the many mornings he chose presence over escape. Friends from the town began to see a change not just in his actions, but in his entire being. A calm confidence, a deep kindness, and an unwavering commitment to growth even in hardship. Then, something unexpected happened. A small magazine from the nearby city published a feature about local changemakers, people who were transforming their towns in subtle but powerful ways. Rohan was surprised to be included, and when he read the article later that day, what struck him most wasn't the praise, but the phrase the writer used, a man who turned his struggle into purpose. At that moment, Rohan felt a warmth inside him. Not pride, but deep gratitude. He thought of the riverbank, the early mornings, the journal entries, and the nights spent beside his father. He understood, truly understood, that his life was not shaped by sudden miracles, but by steadfast choices to keep moving forward even when the destination was unclear. Years later, Rohan's story became a quiet inspiration, not because he became rich or famous, but because he lived with intention. Children in the town began visiting the riverbank in the mornings, not to escape life, but to understand themselves. Friends and neighbors took out journals, asked deeper questions, and discovered parts of themselves that routine had long buried. Rohan spoke to young people about resilience not as a philosophy, but as a lived experience, the experience of waking up early, showing up consistently, and embracing life's uncertainties with courage. And in the end, Rohan's transformation wasn't about a single revelation or a dramatic moment. It was about the cumulative effect of thousands of small decisions, to rise before dawn, to reflect, to love fiercely, to endure without giving up. He came to understand that life does not bend to effort alone. It bends to purpose, clarity, and the relentless belief that one's inner growth matters more than any external result. And in that belief, he found not only his own peace, but a pathway for others to find theirs.